September 22, 1943. Altenfjord, Norway. 3:17 hours. The fjord is a lung made of black water and cold iron. A thin, high wind threads through it, the electric motor of a 50-foot boat that shouldn't be here. Lieutenant Donald Cameron, Royal Navy, leans into the small rubber-rimmed eyepiece of the X6's periscope. Frost crusts the lens, and every breath fogs the cramped control space with the sweet metal reek of oxygen apparatus and battery acid. Above him, the night is stitched with slow-moving searchlights combing the water like white bayonets. Steer 310. 2 degrees down on the hydroplanes, he murmurs, voice steady, hand on the wheel. The ERA, an engine room artificer with oil-blackened fingernails and a diver set ready at his knees, nudges the trimming pump. Water glugs through the boat's belly. The needle in the depth gauge quivers, settles. Somewhere aft, the coxswain, silent, sleeve rolled, works the plane wheel as though kneading dough made of steel. Outside is everything they were told not to believe in. Indicator loops on the seabed, rows of anti-torpedo nets hung from barrel floats, moored patrol craft with hydrophonic ears, and the dark mountain of a battleship at anchor beneath the wind-stripped peaks. Tirpitz, Kriegsmarine's floating fortress, sits inside the innermost cage in Altenfjord, the heart of Altenfjord, the heart of German sea power in the north. You can feel how small the X6 is. The steel skin around you is thin enough to know when the fjord flexes, pressure rises in your ears, the hull creaks back. On either flank, clamped low and tight, ride the 2 side cargoes, 2 tons of high explosive apiece, studded with clockwork and intention. The plan is simple enough to terrify. Creep under the monster, drop the charges, set the clocks, get out. Periscope down, Cameron says. The slender tube slides into its well. He knows where the outer boom must be. The chart is more memory than paper now, traced into his palms by weeks of drills in the northwest mists. Somewhere beyond the bow, a trawler's diesels throb, a Vorpostenboot, one of the fjord shepherds, dragging hydrophones through the black. The boat falls still. Every man listens. The hum thrums up through the soles of their boots, pauses, recedes. The ERA nods and Cameron inches the motor back up. Slow ahead. The first net declares itself with a whisper that becomes a rasp. Wire on steel. The bow kisses the mesh, and the X6 noses upward as the weight of the woven wall makes a new keel. The sound is intimate, like the fjord grinding its teeth. Stop, Cameron says. The motor dies. The net's cables creak along the hull, then hold. No going forward. No going back. Diver, Cameron says not loudly. The ERA is already unstrapping the Davis submerged escape apparatus, the green canvas mask and canister clumsy in the tight air. He squeezes past knees and dials into the forward chamber. Water hisses in around his boots as the outer door opens. The pressure leans on everyone's chest. The ERA vanishes. In the dark and the cold, tied to life by a line about his waist, he gropes down the bow to the biting, tarred strands of the net, finds the securing cable and begins to saw. The little hacksaw, oiled and sharp, sings up his arm. Minutes are measured in finger numbness. The fjord breathes against him. Inside, Cameron watches the trim rise by half a foot as the net slackens under the diver's work. He's on it, the coxswain whispers to no one. The diver's line twitches, one long, one short. All right. Move astern. Cameron eases the motor. A murmur, a shiver. The bow noses back a handspan. The rasp grows higher, frantic, then release. The net slips away like a curtain let go. The diver's line yanks twice more, coming back. They haul him inside, white-faced and gasping, hands raw. No one says thank you, there isn't time to spend on luck. They slide along the boom line like pickpockets against a wall. Above, faint and far, a conversation in German drifts over the water, then the clink of a hook, the slap of a boat fender. A gate is creaking. Through the hull, you hear it, the extra airy noise of water moving where it shouldn't. A tug is being admitted. This is the breach you do not get twice. Now, Cameron says. The motor answers. The X6 slides forward under the rolling belly of the open gate, staying deep, hugging the shadows cast by the boom's weights, where the water is thick with silt and silence. For a breath, the boat is under both net and gate, the worst place of all, no room for error. Then the gate rolls shut behind them with a thud that trembles the bolts. They are inside the outer cage. A ledge looms where it shouldn't. The X6's bow kisses rock. The boat shudders, a crack lances along the periscope's lens, saltwater needles miss the control space. Hold her, Cameron says. The ERA's eyes flick to the battery ammeter, then to the trim pump. A new leak starts slow, building from a tick to a bead, then a steady tear down a bulkhead seam. Keep her level. We're not done yet. He licks a thumbnail, checks his pocket watch. Everything that matters must be finished before the light grows teeth. Far ahead in the fjord's gut, under the eclipsed sky, sits a hull with a skin like a cliff and engines that can stamp a convoy flat. Somewhere near that hull, a gate opens and closes as small boats run the business of a navy at anchor. Somewhere, Lieutenant Basil Place in X7 is feeling the same cold roll over his shoulders, waiting for his own slip in the net. 3 degrees down, Cameron says, like a man asking for the next page in a book already chosen. The X6 answers with the same fragile stubbornness that brought her here. The fjord takes her, and the men inside move with it, not so much riding as being carried, past one wall and toward the next. The second boom is a different animal, newer, tighter, weighted heavier. The rattle that comes up through the hull when they touch it is iron true, the sharp, taut chatter of fresh cable. Cameron doesn't try to nose over it. He backs away and listens. Sound travels here like rumor, it bundles itself and bounces. Above and to port a small craft coughs to life, the cough that belongs to a lighter or tug, not a patrol boat. A minute later, water shifts, gate chains strain and metal grinds on metal. The gate is opening again. Steady. Keep her trimmed. The coxswain's hand stutters on the hydroplanes, compensating for currents twisted by the moving barrier. You can feel your heart matching the boat's rise and fall. Time moves in the scrape of canvas on valves, the soft clack of a stopcock, the tiny hammering of drips. X7, somewhere out on the other side, catches her own gate. Place is a different kind of quiet than Cameron, the hand that waits out a long road, but they are bound by the same line, one you cannot see. His periscope's head breaks water for half a breath near the boom supports as a tug slides through, then ducks. He slots X7 into the tug's shadow and rides the gate down. The boom men smoke and talk above, boots on the timbers. One taps ash into the fjord where a little wave whisks it away. X7 runs under their feet. Inside the second cage, Altenfjord narrows, and the air itself feels forged. Tirpitz sits around a bend, an absence more than a shape, her dark behind darker water. A flak battery on the hillside commands the whole bowl of fjord, its barrels pointed at the sky's memory of bombers. Across the anchorage, small craft nose from berth to berth, shepherding, ferrying, guarding. The battleship's own launches drift around her like remoras to a shark. Searchlights stand at ease, their joints barely audible. Everything goes wrong at once. X6's periscope tube, already fractured, gives up another thin line of water that hisses down the periscope well and bead dances across the dials into the skipper's sleeve. The gyro compass, jarred by the earlier rock kiss, develops a mind of its own, and its card drifts like a broken weather vane. Magnetic only, Cameron says, jaw tight. It is the blindest kind of navigation. Counting seconds, feeling the slope of the seabed with your bones, recalling the chart like the pattern on your palm. They edge deeper. A slab of noise approaches, two ships talking metal to metal. A big boat is moving, perhaps a tender or a fuel lighter. The water close to the surface goes slack as the hull blocks the wind-driven riffle. A gate opens for her, and Cameron takes the chance, pushing X6 at 5 knots for a breath, skimming under the gate's belly into turbulence that almost flings the midget to the surface. The bow leaps, the periscope head breaks water for a flicker, and 3 sharp shouts crack from a pier. A light snaps on and sweeps. It misses the periscope head by a yard and bites the water behind in a white fan, searching. Down? Cameron hisses as if the fjord might be listening. The boat burrows. The leak thickens. The ERA slaps a damage control wedge, a little coffin of softwood, into the worst seam and hammers it in with the heel of his hand. The drip dulls. The crew live on whispers, breaths, and the slow tick of Cameron's watch. They feel her before they see her. The water changes under a ship the size of a cathedral. Pressure rolls. A shadow becomes a force, becomes a presence that takes away all other thoughts. Cameron lifts the periscope just enough to risk a ghost of vision. Black. Steel. Paint scummed with a faint green underfilm where the sea kisses the plates. Mooring cables run down into the fjord like taut falls of chain. The anchor cables hum with a note you feel in the teeth. Hold her at 36 feet, he says, voice gone small and careful. Dead slow. The X6 slides into a world where other laws hold. The plane of the battleship's hull is a cliff face rising into the dark. The shadow under it is a cavern full of machines sleeping with one eye open. The submarine's skin whispers on something taut, the outer edge of an anti-torpedo net hung from the battleship's own booms. Cameron backs off 2 feet, lets the net sway, then coaxes the bow over and under and through, scraping paint. It's a knot of steel and instinct, and when the bow pops free, he tastes blood where he hasn't bit his lip. On X7, place does the same dance with a different rhythm. He finds a slit in the web, a sag under a boom where a line has shortened, and drops X7's nose through, then rides the net down until the boat's little fin is tangled, then wriggles free. For a second his periscope touches the battleship's belly and throws back nothing but black. He feels the hull over him like a roof. Here, Cameron says in a voice only the boat hears. He puts X6's nose into the space where the keel's shadow thickens. The side cargo release levers wait like guillotine handles. There is a brief thought, of a base on a Scottish lock, of an instructor's dry Birmingham voice, then just the cold fact of the thing. Set the pistols for 0812. The ERA reaches past the wet drip and spins the clockwork, little brass faces turning like polite watches at a gentleman's club. The shutter detonators click under their hands. Cameron eases X6 into position, hugging the port side of the keel, where a web of frames meets the skin and the ship's life is loudest. The first charge drops with a muscle-deep thump and a muddy bounce that echoes up through the submarine's ribs. It rolls a foot, catches, sits. The second goes a moment later. The X6 lifts half an inch, lighter now by a pair of iron intentions. Cameron twists the wheel. Astern. Easy. They slide back into a forest of chains and an ocean of consequence. They do not get away clean. The fjord has been kind enough for too long. As X6 backs out from under that terrible roof, a cross-current tugs her tail into a lattice of mooring chains and net lines. A boom wire swings, kisses the starboard saddle position where the charge used to bite, and hooks. The boat slews, her bow nudges the hull again, thunks. Somewhere above, a sentry, bored into another life by the night, hears a noise that doesn't belong. A handlamp flares and dies, a voice speaks into a whistle, and the fjord silence grows bristles. Surface. Cameron snaps because there are distances you cannot fight underwater with a wounded boat. The tanks blow, the little submarine's back arches, and she breaks the skin of Altenfjord like a seal. Air slaps faces. Breath becomes something with taste again, the oily, frost-burned breath of a harbor at war. A searchlight pounces, pins X6 in a white fist. Alarm. Alarm. Rolls off the water in a dozen voices. A machine gun shatters from a pier. Tracer splits the night into red beads. Bullets slap the water and hiss. One smacks the periscope head and skips. Chips of paint spatter down. Cameron stands in the open hatch, a compact silhouette against the light, and waves both arms the way the book says to do when you surrender at sea. Royal Navy. Submarine? He shouts, mouth dry, as if the German for the words will appear in the air. He ducks back down. Scuttle charges set. We're done. He glances aft. 4 men make a tiny ship in a smaller democracy. They all nod. White ensign, someone says in a voice like a memory. The little flag, neatly folded against the day, goes up a scrap of staff. It moves, stubborn and sure, and the machine gun pauses for half a beat as if even the gunner needs to look at that. Then more shouts. Orders. A launch roars out from Tirpitz's far side, engines shouldering water, bow wave bright in the searchlight's path. Cameron slaps the scuttle charges, small bags of explosive for just this purpose, onto the battery compartment, yanks the lanyards and feels the boat's heart begin its last argument with itself. Out, he says, one hand on the ladder. Cold hammers the first man's face as he climbs into the light. The second goes. The third. Cameron last. The launch's bow is already swinging in. A rifle points, then drops, then points again. German voices tumble over one another. A rope arcs through the night and lands with a smack on X6's bow. A rating, bare arms, cap askew, makes it off the launch and onto the little submarine with a cat's grace. He stares down into the open hatch and sees nothing, just the dark and the knowledge of it. He steps back. The scuttling charge pops like a heavy door slammed underwater. Water tears in through a blown plank. X6 sags. She lists like a dying fish, sighs and begins to go. The German on her bow springs back to the launch, boots skidding on wet paint. The white ensign disappears as the water folds over it. A hand grabs Cameron by the collar, drags him onto the launch's wet deck. He lies there, chest heaving, and watches the spot where his boat was become just water. Under the battleship, Place feels X7's second charge bite and settle, then he turns her gently, looking for the path out. He finds not a path but a snare. A net hanging from Tirpitz's own booms has shifted with the sub's passing and now nurses his stern like a hand with a mind. He tries ahead, a stern, a wriggle left, a wriggle right. All stop, he says finally. The boat is breathing with him. The men inside are listening to the clocks they cannot hear. Diver. It is a last resort with timers ticking. The ERA suits and goes, face going pale where fear is not permitted any words. He slides into the water and feels for the line that holds them. It cuts his gloves. He takes the little saw and works at it. Overhead is the flat, oppressive belly of a city of iron. He cannot see enough. The line bites, coughs strands but holds. His fingers go stupid in the cold. He signals what he can, stuck. Depth charges begin in the fjord, clumsy, late, a rumor that the guards have found the idea of a threat and are now pounding the water with it. The first stumbles away from X7 and blooms somewhere 100 yards off. The second is closer. Water hammers the sub's sides with a palm that has no bones. Instruments jump. The ERA slams back into the forward chamber with a bruise blossoming on his shoulder. Place waits another 30 seconds, then makes the decision that keeps men alive. Surface. X7 climbs. A net strand holds her for a last humiliating half second, then snaps, and she comes up inside the ring of launches and shouting in light. Rifles on her. Men on her. The hatch opens. Place stands up into a world that is stating its claims to him. Royal Navy, he calls, and the cold clubs his teeth. He raises his hands. Tiefenladung. Nach mehr. Someone is yelling to a man with a rack of depth charges on a smaller boat halfway down the anchorage. Was ist das? Eins Wordboot? From a sailor on the nearest launch, incredulous and laughing a little out of fear that demands laughter. The story tonight will be how they caught a toy. Aboard Tirpitz, a petty officer with a clipboard and a jaw like a shovel counts British sailors as they are pushed up a ladder and across a steel deck that rings. Cameron and Place meet each other's eyes as their lines cross, two brief profiles in a pool of light. There is no space for words. Between them, in the water where the anchor chains hum with sleep and expectation, two clocks tick toward a minute that will put an end to laughter. The minutes between capture and consequence are dry and absurd. A German sailor with a cigarette holds it out to Cameron with an expression that is almost apologetic. Cameron declines with a shake of the head. A petty officer with his cap cocked just so runs his pen down a page, asks a question in brusque English. Name? Rank? Nummer? Place answers with the easy politeness of a man buying a train ticket. Somewhere aft, a pump whines, a motor coughs, and Tirpitz is a city that believes in its morning. Alarm. The word isn't shouted this time. It moves through metal, pride turns suddenly attentive. Captain zur See Hans Meyer, broad-shouldered, damp-eyed from a night that did not include sleep, steps into the conning tower with a mug of coffee and a map of the fjord folded under his arm. He has been told to expect RAF bombers, fleet air arm raids, torpedoes. Nobody spoke with conviction about a 50-foot thing with a pocket full of time. 812 strikes somewhere that has been made for that purpose and the fjord leaps. The first blast comes under the port side, abaft the forward turrets, a deep-throated concussion that tries to turn water into stone for half a heartbeat. Shock swats Tirpitz up out of her equilibrium with a curious, contemptuous strength. Men drop to their knees in corridors that tilt suddenly. Coffee arcs from a mug and vanishes into the deck. A tool cart becomes a weapon and throws itself down a passage. The second blast follows with the ruthless timing of an argument that was never going to be polite. It is aft, near the turbine rooms, a blow that knocks words out of mouths. In the engine room the world is steam and percussion. Bearings spit and howl. A turbine, the long high-pitched heart of a giant, jumps in its bed and comes down crooked. A shaft that had been a straight intention now has a bend where a bend should never be. Packings blow. Men cough black into white air. Electric panels spit arcs as if laughing at their own idea of safety. Lekabware. Zu den Stationen. Roars a voice and it is all hands now, damage control manuals made flesh. The ship's skin flexes like an animal's. Frames feel an ache down their length that will not stop aching for months. Plates along the port side dimple inward, then hold. Somewhere forward, a watertight door, one of the good ones, slips half an inch in its frame and refuses to believe in tightness anymore. Water comes in here, not fast enough to frighten, not slow enough to ignore. The list is a gentleman's quarter degree, then half, then one. On the bridge, Meyer has one hand white on a rail as the other flicks to phones. Maskinen abstoppen. Stromlage prüfen. Melden. Words go out into a ship that is used to obeying them. Reports come in with the messy kindness of the truth. Flooding in compartments A and B, slight in E, port outer shaft out of alignment, port generator in trouble, steam lines wrecked, forward magazine safe for now, pumps on, pumps fighting. Above them all, the fjord returns to itself with a groan, throwing back shock to the mountains. Avalanches prune a little ice. On shore, at the flak battery, a gunner stares with his mouth open in a way he will never admit to later. A mechanic on a pier drops a spanner and crosses himself, then remembers what uniform he wears and shoves his hands in his pockets. On deck, the British prisoners flinch because bodies know things before minds believe them. Cameron feels the shock wave climb up the soles of his boots and into his spine. Place closes his eyes for a count of 2, opens them to find a German sailor also blinking in the same way. The petty officer with the clipboard looks down at his list as if it might explain explosions. Was this das? He asks into a telephone without meaning the words to be heard. A voice on the other end uses Minen and Explosionen like prayers. Someone else says Spernitz, as if asking if the netting exploded of its own politeness. No one says they did it, because there is no they in the model. Yeah. Below the waterline, at the place where charges sat and waited, the fjord has done what high explosive tells water to do. It has transmitted fury to steel. Welds protest. Fittings break. The careful alignment of mighty machines, a pride built in neat shipyards and certified by ink and hierarchy, goes crooked, measurably and unacceptably crooked. It is not just the flooding, not just the bent shaft or the torn pipe. It is the fact that a ship made to move is told to sit very still and have a long think about humility. An hour later, the immediacy has been paid with sweat and quick decisions. Flooding is under control, then not, then under control again. Divers go over the side with lines around their waists to feel the skin of the ship like doctors reading a bruise through a shirt. Reports pile on reports. The diagnosis hardens. No sortie today, no sortie this month, probably not this year if steel has the memory it usually has. In the wardroom, someone, an officer with a nice pen and a taste for irony, says in a voice not meant to carry, so the English toys bite. No one smiles. Out across the Arctic, a convoy somewhere has more air in its lungs. No one here mentions that either. On the afterdeck, in a circle of guards with rifles gone lax in their hands, Cameron and Place stand straight in their wet clothes, eyes bright with what they have heard in the water. A young German sailor, the one who laughed at the word Zwergbut, looks at the British with a new diagnosis of his own, and the word in his mouth when he spits to the side is not a laugh anymore. The day pours itself into the work of not drowning. Night takes over and gives it back in cold and quiet. By the second morning, frost rims the mooring lines like glass veins, and Tirpitz, giant that she is, sits lower by inches but stable, breathing hard, one hand pressed to her ribs. Divers come up with hands that won't quite close and eyes that won't forget what fingers felt. Buckling along frames here and here, a chief diver reports, tapping a penciled sketch on a soggy clipboard. Outer plating set in on the port side, keel fair overall, but he draws a little bend where a line should be ruler straight. Men who speak in numbers and tolerances gather around the wet paper and decide how long the ship will be a museum exhibit at anchor. Repair ships sidle up, cranes clack, welders' arcs sputter and spit blue light into Arctic darkness. A floating workshop groans with the drag of replacement steel. Pumps beat time. A tug fusses at a stern that will not be moved for months. In short, train cars hiccup into Alta with crates of parts and drums of oil that are going to be turned into the idea of movement sometime in a future that refuses to be a schedule. Inside the big hull, the elegant guts of power are undressed under harsh light. A turbine is blocked up and stared at like a wounded racehorse. Gearbox alignment off by 4 millimeters, says a man with a gauge and a certainty. Shafting true? No. He doesn't have to say the rest. The quiet spreads from the numbers. On the hillside, in the little cluster of barracks and administration huts, a conference becomes a confessional. Maps are flattened, reports stacked, reputations placed carefully out of splash range. Vice admirals who have always hated nets find themselves demanding more nets, thicker nets, nets studded with mines and hung with bells in their dreams. Patrol patterns are rewritten. Sentries are told that the shape of the enemy now includes a thing about the length of a lorry sent to kill a ship like a flea bites a bear. The word's wordbook loses its sneer and becomes doctrine. The British prisoners are moved ashore to a barracks that smells of boiled wool and tobacco, then kept under a watch that was less tense yesterday. A Feldwebel with proper vowels brings them tea that is almost beer-colored. He looks at Cameron as he sets the tray down and says in English with a careful dignity, "Brave." Cameron nods once and says nothing. Play says, "Thank you," because politeness is a weapon too sometimes. That night, lying on boards that remember trees, they both sleep as men who have been doing arithmetic in the sea are allowed to sleep. The fjord goes on being itself. Wind grinds the surface, snow comes in with the gray and goes out with the black. A maintenance boat with men in sealskin balaclavas chugs past and points with gloved fists. There, spots on the battleship skin where repair is a word with 30 steps and a prayer. Underwater, the place where the charges spoke has become a story you can feel with your hands, a roughness in the skin of a thing that had been smooth. Weeks run into months. The light hides and returns. Around Christmas, a new shaft section fits like a tooth filling into a mouth that has learned about pain. A spring is promised to engines that must be reborn. To the east, beyond the Kola Inlet, men in fur hats and hard boots wolf down bread on a pier and watch a convoy unload with a little more leisure than they had last winter. Somewhere in London, a clerk uses a black pencil to put a red check beside a line that says Tirpitz, out of action, and he does not know what frost looks like on a mooring line at Altenfjord. Meyer stands on his bridge one evening with the kind of cigarette you smoke to make your hands do something while you think. He tastes tar and the metal taste of his ship's breath. He did not laugh at the miniature submarine before, he does not laugh at anything in that range now. Orders will come. Repairs will finish. A spring sky will bring RAF carriers clawing at the daylight with bombs and barracudas and a new vocabulary of attack. But that is not tonight. Tonight is the long silence of a ship that wanted to be moving and is learning to sit still. On a pier near the sentry box where the prisoner ledger lives, a German sailor runs his finger along a line of names, English words that look like proper nouns even when you do not know them. He taps 2 of them. Pair of lieutenants. He looks up at the fjord and the big ship and then down at the names again. The wind lifts off the water and licks his ears. He shrugs and smiles with only the upper lip, the way men do when they have been shown something they will have to respect now. For the men who crept under, there will be medals in a far-off room with carpet and bright smiles. For the ones who did not return, X5 vanished into an argument with the water that left no witnesses. The fjord keeps a more intimate accounting. For the ship in the middle of it all, there is a kind of waiting that erases illusions. Steel can be proud. Steel can be taught. You can stand at the fjord's edge in your mind and hear it. The quiet slap of water on a hull that is no longer invincible, the whisper of a flag you cannot see, the tiny patient tick of clock somewhere in the story, always winding down to the moment when the big things learn about the small.